Today on the CIO Lifeline, we're going to talk about Microsoft licensing and how to best manage that in your organization. Stick around. Pretty jazzed up about our guest today. Someone who can help try and peel back this complicated onion and all the layers that come with Microsoft licensing. Tom, why don't you do the honors of introducing our guest today?
Thanks, Tony. So excited to have Jeff Pergolski join us today. Jeff's going to give us a little bit on his background, but I've known Jeff since his parole officer said that he had to learn this licensing in order to stay a free man. And so we're excited to have him tell us a little bit more about how he got those credentials.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
You're going to tell us a little bit about yourself, Jeff?
Sure. So I have been at Innovia Consulting for almost 15 years now. I started as a network admin technology consultant and quickly got nudged towards a sales role. And in that, early on, 15 years ago, I was selling server hardware, laptops, computers, Cisco firewalls. And a big part of what we sold at Innovia was obviously Microsoft licensing. So I, at the time, was, this is well before subscriptions were an option. I was trying to sell Exchange server licensing and Exchange server CALs and trying to figure out, the most, getting our customers the most bang for their buck. And I was tasked with passing a Microsoft licensing certification exam. So I think over the 15 years that I've been here, I'm somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 or 26 different Microsoft certifications. But one of those is the volume license SMB, small to medium-sized business licensing exam. So when people complain about licensing, I just sort of listen to it and think, well, I had to sit through a 2.5-hour exam answering questions about this to earn one of my certifications. So I don't think clients that have to deal with it have it that bad, but I might be a bit jaded.
That's such a great point, because if you look at the screen, here's just one example. I did a quick search as to the types of licensing that exists out there, because let's face it, Microsoft has done a lot of acquisitions over the years, and when you have, when you're a company of that size, I don't know how you manage it. In fact, how many SKUs do they have out there today?
If you look at the individual SKUs throughout their Dynamics offerings, if you look at the new NCE or new commerce experience subscription SKUs in the Microsoft 365 platform, I come up with a total of about 2,700 different SKUs.
Wow. That's a lot to digest.
Well, and Jeff, so in your experience of the 2,700 SKUs, how many SKUs does a typical customer have in play within their organization?
I would say and we're dealing mostly in the SMB space. I'd say that typically around 10 different SKUs is what most of the organizations that I deal with have. Typically one that relates to their email needs and their Office desktop application needs. So that's something like an E3 or an E5, a business standard or business premium, and that's usually the lion's share of everyone's organization. And then from there, if they're running a Microsoft Dynamics ERP product, they've got the SKUs for Business Central, and then occasionally there's some of the other apps that the Power Apps, apps for business.
What would you say the percentage is if you look at on-prem? I think of Great Plains, even Solomon, the many different flavors of the Vision. What do you think the breakdown is of their SKUs between on-prem and cloud?
When you look at the on-prem options, you have basically, as they sunset older versions or older licensing models, you really only have a license for a full user, a a limited user, a device user, and then in that space you can have the different versions there. But it's pretty straightforward on the subscription side. There's the same number of SKUs, but then you get into, because they're subscriptions, the different types of term lengths of those subscriptions, and that's where the numbers start to extrapolate on the subscription side. So I'd say there are less SKUs, and it's more straightforward in the on-prem world than in this new SaaS world.
So Microsoft has different SKUs based on the term length of the license?
Yes. When we're provisioning accounts, that's now one of the first questions we ask. It used to be in the legacy world, everything was just a month to month. But since the middle of 2022 and Microsoft rolled out their new commerce experience, or NCE, we have to decide if we are selling SKUs for a month, a year, or 3 years at a time.
Do you see, is there any rationalization that's going on at Microsoft, or is that 2,700 number you mentioned only going to get bigger? I mean, I think it'll get bigger with acquisitions, right? Because they're always looking to inherit or purchase the next product. But is there a conscious effort to start to make this more manageable, which I would think benefits them as well?
In the Microsoft 365 space, they continually are, creating new subscriptions as they add functionality to the different areas. They start to dice it up, and I think that Microsoft has prided themselves on from the early days of Satya Nadella's term as the CEO, that he wanted to give customers options, and I think just a byproduct of that is the sometimes complexity of licensing that pops up from giving them options of on-prem or in the cloud, and options about term lengths of subscriptions, things like that.
But that on-prem option, isn't that going to go the way of the dinosaur? If I think, I mean, they've been trying to incentivize my organization to get to the cloud, and then they make pretty aggressive deals to, again, to help customers make that leap. I mean, and to me, to me, I'm going to call it a cash grab. That's not, may not be entirely fair, but it's not just Microsoft. It's all these ERP vendors. They're helping companies make the decision for them.
It's not just your cash they're grabbing. So if you feel better, you've got a lot of company.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because I think of your Oracles, your SAPs, your Epicor. I mean, if I want to say I want to go to the latest, greatest version, my only option is cloud. Is that correct? Or are they still doing on-prem BC?
No, you could still go on-prem, but Jeff and I were just having this conversation recently. So there's a couple of things going on, right? So there have been incentives up until about the end of this year, or 2022, to try to get customers to migrate to the cloud. The primary reason is that it's a better annuity revenue for Microsoft, but also your system as a customer, this should be your last upgrade. And so, Jeff and I were talking about pricing and some of the complexities, and the fact that it is sometimes a larger number to transition. But if you do the project right, it's the last time you're going to have to upgrade. Your system will be up to date from that point forward. And so that's a big incentive. And as we have crossed sort of this tipping point, I think you're going to see Microsoft reel in some of these incentives. And, customers will simply have to make a choice as to whether or not the cloud makes sense, because they're not going to get a financial incentive to switch.
Well, but let me go back to the on-prem question I asked. Like, if I want F&O, Dynamics for Finance and Operations, it's only a cloud version, right? They stopped enhancing or building AX. Am I right?
I think Tony is onto something though. I mean, in the Business Central world, they haven't stopped developing the on-prem software. They lead with their SaaS offerings, and so when there's new functionality added, it comes first to the cloud, and then it gets rolled out to an update to the on-prem version. But they are still maintaining that. So I'm not sure in the AX world if, although I don't see price sheets for that.
And we'll have to. I'm going to run this down for us. But the last time that I was aware, so Microsoft tried. They rolled out a big announcement. Cloud only going forward. But it turned out that some of these global warehouses and some of these really far-flung distribution or manufacturing operations couldn't. They didn't have the bandwidth. They couldn't pass enough data to run their operation in a cloud app. And so they had to walk that back. And so there's a sync. I think the main database is cloud, but there is some sync capability to an on-prem.
When it comes to licensing, and Jeff, I learned something here already, where you said it was an average of 10 to 12 SKUs in your typical organization. I have two questions. First one, are we seeing everything being named user, or is there still a concurrent user, shared user model in the cloud?
Yeah, I would say that everything in the Microsoft space is named users.
Okay.
With
so now back to
maybe the device licenses, right, Jeff?
Yeah, right. Yeah, but 99%
That's
is
right.
named.
Okay, device licensing, good call out, and a nice way if approached properly can save an organization some money. So back to my leaky bucket comment. If you have average of 10 to 12 SKUs per facility, per business, and they're named user, my experience is if a license goes unused, you're not getting alerts, or Microsoft's not automatically going to forgive that monthly for that unused license. So if you don't have your arms around it, you could start to blow up your budget. My next question, are there tools out there that you recommend, or maybe there's something in the Microsoft world that helps do this, where someone can have visibility to unused licensing and be able to manage this very big and giant complex ecosystem?
In the SaaS world, virtually being able to self-provision if you've got, a partner that gives you a portal to manage those licenses. So you have the flexibility to provision things quickly. And that should mean that you keep closer track of the ups and downs in your user count. But and so the other advantage is that in the SaaS world, there are tools that in the admin portal of your Office 365 that you can track usage. There are various Power BI reports that come out of the box. There's telemetry reports that monitor performance, and you can glean user information from that. So the tools are there. I don't think Microsoft does a real good job promoting those tools, maybe for obvious financial reasons, but there are some tools that exist.
Let's do a little compare and contrast. So I'm going to show I'm going to show two screens here. Here's the first one. Now this, back to my complexity of how do you manage this licensing. And this report was developed by Inovia Consulting. So thank you both. This helped make my life a lot easier in managing licensing throughout our organization. So this is every Microsoft SKU assigned, and there's three buckets here. You have your Business Central, you have Office 365, and you have, I'll call it, Other. And I can click on any one of these regions, and it helps break it down. If I want to, here's another screen. If I want to drill into the users assigned to these buckets, I have this available. But it also shows me, here are the total licenses that I'm paying for, and here are the ones that have not been assigned. So I have this very simplistic dashboard that gives me all this information on one screen, and I can drill into it. Now, you mentioned the telemetry and the different Power BI reports that Microsoft offers. Either it's relatively recent, I just haven't been studious enough to figure it out, But how does this compare?
I would say that this report is a lot more straightforward than Microsoft doesn't have a Power BI report that shows users unassigned, but you could create a comparison Power BI that looked at licenses and available licenses and pulled those metrics.
Well, I believe Tom charged us 480 grand, if memory serves me right.
And I think the ROI was like what, 14 days?
12 days.
12 days.
Well,
Yeah,
The
outstanding.
time I waste going through these reports. But you bring up a great point, Jeff, because I think what Microsoft does, I tip my hat to them, is giving you full creative freedom to craft your own reports and get at certain endpoints to get that data back. So if you have someone on staff who's eager to help solve this problem, or companies like yourself that crafted what you did for us in Power BI, and it could be Tableau, it could be any front end, right? I
But it probably
do
should be Power
appreciate
BI.
that. What's that?
I said, but it probably should be Power BI.
Probably should be Power BI. Sorry, Microsoft. And if I cherry pick an SKU, I talk about this leaky bucket, but SKUs can be $6 per user per month. I look at this model kind of like the whole streaming craze. Get Disney Plus or Paramount Plus, for $20 a month. That's great. Doesn't amount to much if you don't have internet access. And oh, by the way, I prefer to have this channel also. And I enjoy Netflix. Hey, this YouTube TV is kind of cool. I'd like to get Hulu without all the ads. I want Pandora without the commercials. I mean, all these things add up because it's easy to get away from you. I mean, I've lived it.
So, Jeff, Tony, you make a good point. Jeff, if you were going to give a Microsoft customer, one or two tips as to how they could do a better job managing their licensing and making sure it's appropriate for their organization's needs, what would those be?
Taking an inventory of the software needs of your users. When we onboard a new customer and we start to look at one of the processes we go through is to analyze their licensing. And I will say with most organizations, when I go through and ask them, why do you have 2 SKUs of Power BI Premium, or why, like, the IT guy doesn't know. Someone told me they needed it. I'm like, well, neither one of these has been assigned, but this account is disabled. So just taking that inventory. And then the second recommendation, I would say that probably leaning on a partner, ask them to do some to do some of that analysis with you to help understand, I guess, because it is complicated and sort of what you were talking about, Tony, adding a lot of SKUs together, and then at the end of the day, are you really saving much money? The thing that gets kind of forgotten oftentimes when comparing the on-prem world to the SaaS world is that now a Microsoft 365 SKU that includes email, it doesn't just, it isn't just the Exchange Cal of the past that it's replacing. It's also replacing the Exchange infrastructure, bandwidth. All of that is edge protection. That's all being included in the Office 365 SKUs on the ERP side, a SQL database and the server OS that was running on, plus the SQL Cals. All of that's being rolled into.
I'll buy.
Jesus, Tom, I mean, this is the first time my head goes. We should have sponsorship on this.
That's right.
This guy's moonlighting for Microsoft.
That's right. Yeah. No, but thanks very much. I do think those are important perspectives, right?
Yeah, like I mean, I'm whether you're gonna pay Microsoft that that $12 a month for a SKU, or you're going to try to spin up a server somewhere else. When you compare, we haven't even really talked about some of the SKUs like Azure, which Azure more, I guess, a platform than a license.
I had a former CEO of mine who sends me a Google search. How much does it cost for gigabyte of cloud storage? And it was pennies. I'm just like, ugh, you know. So it kind of inspired me to write a white paper. But when you truly break down for enterprise cloud usage, this blossoms into many different SKUs. You mentioned Azure, right? And there's also, the concept of blob storage versus dedicated storage. You have these different tools in the Microsoft ecosystem that help make things more efficient. If you're gonna do Azure and Active Directory, it's another consideration. So there is a lot of things for it to add up rather quickly. And I don't disagree. I mean, it does lessen the need to have network administration or database administrator on staff, but you also have to be mindful too. Again, like, go back to that cloud licensing leaky bucket, but you also have to shore up your internal infrastructure getting to the outside world, because now you're beholden to that internet connection and the strength of it. Because if one goes down, that business is down. And the other thing that I'll just throw out there too for our listeners is the cost of storage. It's always kind of burned me where E3 and a Microsoft E3 license, you get 100 gigabytes on your mailbox, and we have 1,200 employees. So do the math on that. How many terabytes you're getting here? But yet, for SharePoint Online, you get 2 terabytes, for X fee, and all of a sudden it starts to, I need to add more, ramp up, ramp up, ramp up, cost, cost, cost. I mean, it's just, much longer conversation, but getting your ducks in a row, doing that audit, and truly understanding what it is you need to run your organization, all great tips.
Well, and it really sounds like, based on your stories, Tony, that a therapist would be a good idea too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As soon as we're done here, I'm speed dialing.
Well, speaking of therapists, Tony mentioned the word audit, and I've helped enough customers sit through a Microsoft licensing audit that starts to give me a nervous tick too.
Jeff, I thought you were going someplace you didn't, but the last 2 times customers have called and said, "Hey, we got a letter on a Microsoft audit. What should we do?" We said, "Tell them you're on Office 365, and they'll go away." They're like, "Really?" I'm like,
Ooh,
"Yeah,
good
really."
tip.
And they do.
Good tip.
I mean, it's totally licensed. You can't fake it.
Well, and is there any grandfathering or upfront payment techniques that can still apply for businesses, Jeff? I mean, is there something to help get ahead of this cost curve that folks are facing?
Certain spaces there are in the Azure space, you can prepay for essentially blocks of Azure virtual resources that offer pretty substantial discounts in the standard licensing space on Microsoft's 365 platform. I don't think there really are anymore. It's funny, our customers who have lingered on the volume licensing, old school on-prem licensing model that then have renewals come up, then they'll forward the letter that Microsoft sends to them. And those new letters in the last 12 months recommend that the customers all pretty much don't renew their software, but move to what Microsoft calls a more modern licensing platform. And that just means the CSP, the cloud solution provider, where you can still renew a on-prem server OS, but you're going to do it through a subscription now, not the old way of doing it.
Are there any Microsoft counterparts that you engage with?
Let's see. So I have a few resources. There is a partner space, mostly in the Dynamics world, where a lot of other partners, along with Microsoft licensing concierge, get together and we can post questions, similar to the user group forums. But the most difficult thing about working with Microsoft is trying to get them to say yes to different licensing scenarios, because just about every time we ask those questions of Microsoft, they come back with a standard answer that usually includes the 45-page PDF of the licensing document, and they don't say yes and they don't say no, but they tell you to. And so there's a lot of power in I think partners to make sure that that customers are getting the most for their investment. At Inovia, I think that's something that we do pretty well.
I agree. I've been working with Inovia for 10 years, and I got to tell you, you bring a lot of value, especially in this space. Although your owner is considered one of the top licensing gurus for Microsoft. So my question to you, Jeff, is how does it feel to be number two?
It's a I've been number two my whole life, so it's a spot I'm comfortable in.
You're number one in our hearts, Jeff.
Yes, yeah. Hey, and something I am privy to, and I'll tell you how I first was made aware of this. I'm going to ask you to expand on this. But at one of the Microsoft user group shows, I saw you work in the booth, and when I happened to look down, I saw you had some custom-made Inovia Nike sneakers. And the conversation morphed into that you're a collector, you're a connoisseur of sneakers. So how many do you have? So how long have you been doing this, and how many do you have in your collection?
Oh, let's see. So I am guilty of being a sneakerhead. I would say that I try not to actually know exactly how many pairs I have because it's embarrassing, but I'm pushing the limits on 300 pairs of sneakers. What got me started into it was the first year that Michael Jordan released a sneaker, and there was something about those sneakers. I was in high school playing basketball. It seemed like like I needed those sneakers, and then from there I collected every at least one pair of every Air Jordan that they released through like number 27. There's a lot of just crazy designs, really, like I say, ugly shoes that I seem to be attracted to, crazy color schemes. And so I was hanging around skateboard shops and I saw lots of shoes, so I started buying them up, and now my collection is approaching somewhere in the neighborhood of about $40,000 on those 300.
Ooh. So you have all these sneakers. What is your favorite? You got to have a favorite.
Yeah, well, let's see. That's tough. What makes it sort of fun, I'm sure, is along with like collecting anything, the sort of the stories that go behind it. I would say that I actually have them. I grabbed them here. This was I did send a picture of these along. These are a pair of Nike Dunk SB Nike Dunks. So those are means that they're skateboard specific, and that was those dunks are called the Fro Skate Dunks, and it was a group that Nike partnered with to design that. A group of people out of Chicago. And they actually these are people that I'm friends with, and so they got put together with Nike when they came up with this dunk. It was like, it's got crazy colors, it's got like everything I like about it, and I know the people that were involved, and it's a great organization. So that would probably be my number one right now.
I was in Vegas with my kid who turned 21, and I said, pick a spot. Where do you? Because he's a basketball fan. I was expecting him, to go see Phoenix. Not Phoenix. That's my other son. Portland Trailblazers. I expected, I want to go see a Portland Trailblazer game, and he picked Vegas, which is fun city, right? In our few days there, we came across a sneaker store, and it had a black Mickey Mouse, this big statue of black Mickey Mouse with an Uzi.
Airbrick.
And what's the name of that store?
Well, I don't know the store, but I know the Mickey Mouse, those collectible toys that are like, that would be like a 400% is what they call the size of that one.
And it was impressive, and they had the single shoe, and it was cellophane wrapped, and we're like trying to play the guess game. How much did this cost? And you turn it over, you're like, holy shit, who's buying these? Sure enough, line at the cash register, man. I mean, felt like big business at the time. So
I try not to look at myself as a collector. I'm an enjoyer of shoes, and so I wear most of my shoes. But I have a pair of Kanye West's last shoe before he left Nike, and that was, I mean, I got that like 10 years ago, but that's like unworn. That shoe is worth $15,000.
Tom, it feels like to me Jeff's a one percenter.
It's that's an interesting side gig you got there.
Yeah. Well, see, the problem is I only acquire the shoes. I don't flip them. So then.
So you missed that part of business school.
So the wife wants a mother-in-law suite, and you have $40,000 of sneakers. Who wins?
Yeah.
The new wife for sure.
Yeah, let's go with that. This is going to be published someplace.
We are on the record. Thanks again for tuning in, and special thanks to Jeff Pergolski for introducing us to some of the complexities and helping to simplify Microsoft licensing. Also want to call out the Inovia Conversation, a podcast that Jeff does with a colleague, Steve Waltz. Be sure to check that out on Spotify, YouTube, and a variety of other podcast platforms. All right, at the count of 3, 1, 2, 3.
Sometimes that's the only way we can get applause.
We're doing a whole episode on licensing. Ever play the Would You Rather game? That comes to mind. You ever peel back your fingernails? You know what pisses me off? I feel like the more expensive the shoe, the less material that is used in the shoe.
That could be.
We have tens of views coming with this topic. Sorry, I'm kidding, because this is insanely interesting.